This story happened 10 years ago when I was a freshman in college, attending a university tucked away in a remote corner of Oregon. It was November, and the small town had just been hit by a cold front. I was working part-time at Papa Marco's pizza shop to earn some extra cash. Our team usually had 5 delivery drivers covering different areas. However, that night we were short-staffed. Only me, Tom, and Ashley were working. As dusk fell, after delivering a spicy Italian sausage pizza to a regular customer in town, my manager asked me to deliver to an area I was unfamiliar with. After checking the map, I found that the place was only a 15-minute motorcycle ride away, at the foot of Sentinel Hill, where a solitary house stood obscured by tall pine trees. With a sense of freedom piercing through the cold air, I sped off to the address. Upon arrival, I pushed open the squeaky front gate, walked into the front yard, and pressed the doorbell. There was no response, and through the frosted glass next to the door, it seemed all the lights were off, which I found very odd during dinner time. I rang the doorbell again and shouted, "Hello, Papa Marco's Pizza Delivery." Right after I spoke, a flyer squeezed into the mailbox slot was quickly pulled inside. I briefly caught a silhouette behind the frosted glass. I couldn't see his face, just a motionless figure. When there was no response to my repeated calls, a chill went down my spine. Confused, I retreated to the roadside and called my manager to explain the situation. That's when he told me I had gone to the wrong address. The correct one was on the other side of the hill. I turned around, puzzled, to see that the silhouette behind the frosted glass had disappeared, and the front door was now slightly ajar. I nervously muttered an apology for the disturbance and hurried off to the correct destination. Upon reaching the right house, the customer came out quickly, showing slight annoyance at the wait. I honestly explained the situation with the house I had mistakenly entered. The customer looked at me puzzled and asked, "Are you saying you went straight into that house?" He paused for a moment, staring at me intently. "Didn't you see the warning tape outside the house?" I shook my head. I hadn't seen anything like that. I explained that the front door had opened as if it was waiting for a visitor, and I hadn't seen any tape. The customer's shocked expression informed me that a family had been found murdered in that house I had mistakenly visited 5 days ago. On my way back to the shop after the delivery, the silence along the road was unsettling. I couldn't shake off the encounter. As I approached the house that was supposed to be sealed off, I slowed down, my absolute terror being that it was now clearly marked as a crime scene, with vivid yellow warning tape on the door. Deeply shaken, I began to question everything. Had I just come into contact with something from beyond this world? Or had I inadvertently stepped into a parallel dimension? A few days later, as I passed Sentinel Hill again, everything became clear. There were only 2 houses on the hill, no more, no less. I have never found an explanation for what happened that twilight, and it remains a chilling mystery and an unsolved puzzle from my past. When I was younger, during the summer of my sophomore year in college, I was filled with enthusiasm and wanted to take my first step towards independence. Through my cousin's recommendation, I found a night shift job at a medical clinic located in a remote area. The clinic was adjacent to an abandoned airport where nothing could be heard but the desolate sound of the wind, and the runway was full of cracks and overgrown with weeds. While introducing me to the job, my cousin half-jokingly warned me that if anyone suggested I take the night shift, I should refuse it under any circumstances. He had a foreboding look, and although I was skeptical, I nodded in agreement. However, as Valentine's Day approached, I decided to take on the controversial night shift job to earn enough money. On the first night of the shift, the supervisor, pale-faced and staying late, emphasized work discipline in an unsettling manner. He said that we would not have any visitors at night, and all work should be completed before midnight, leaving only a lone lamp on in a dark corner. Everything had to be finished on time, no later than midnight. after which the office should be locked quickly until daylight. I followed the rules, always finishing all my work before midnight and returning to my office under the flickering light. The office was eerily empty, with only occasional sounds from outside making me uneasy. Just as I was getting used to the routine of the night shift, everything horrifying happened suddenly. At midnight, when I turned off all the remaining lights, the clinic was immediately enveloped in dead silence. Just as I was about to settle down, I felt a suffocating atmosphere. Looking out the office window, it seemed like something was moving in the darkness, and the disturbance outside made my heart race. My blood seemed to freeze because standing in front of the window was a pale-faced caretaker with a lifeless gaze. He seemed to be desperately signaling to me, but suddenly, his mouth twisted into a sinister smile, revealing uneven teeth. Then, his figure lunged towards the glass like an uncontrolled ghost, and I heard a sharp, loud noise. Although I instinctively covered my face, expecting the impact of shattered glass, when I opened my eyes, the window was intact, and the caretaker's figure had vanished. I impulsively dialed the security guard, trembling as I described the terrifying scene. Yet, what was even more chilling was the guard's indifferent response over the phone, his voice sounding eerily strange. The moment I hung up the phone, a cold breeze blew in through the gap under the door, and the sound of the doorknob turning grew faster, as if something was approaching from behind. Paralyzed by fear, I hid in the corner, trying my best to suppress my breathing. Somehow, I managed to last until daylight, until the security guard confirmed it was safe. But I knew from that night on, an endless fear had taken root in my heart. Whenever it's deep into the night, the caretaker's cold smile and his figure lunging at the glass always reappear in my mind, becoming an indescribable nightmare. A few months ago, just after graduating from college, I stepped into the tense and complicated society. However, I found it difficult to adapt to the work pace of the company and soon chose to resign. As a freelancer, not wanting to become a burden to my parents, I had to look for temporary jobs to make ends meet. One night, as I lay in bed, I stumbled upon an enticing job posting, $20,000 per hour, simply to stand at a designated spot. Despite my doubts, due to the pressure of living, I replied to the job notification without hesitation. The other party told me that they would notify me as soon as there was work. I was skeptical about the simplicity and high salary of the job, but due to financial pressure, I tried to put aside my concerns. Not long after, I received my first task, to come to a nearby park at 8 o'clock the next evening and stay for an hour. The following night, I arrived on time at the deserted park, which was empty except for a few dim streetlights and several stray cats wandering around. With confusion and a sense of unease, I stood in front of a bronze statue as instructed. To suppress my nervousness, I started playing with my phone. As time ticked away, an unsettling atmosphere began to spread in the silent park. Suddenly, just before the stipulated time was about to end, a woman appeared at the entrance of the park and slowly walked towards me. She was wearing ordinary sportswear, but her entire figure was exceptionally thin, even to the point of discomfort. I thought she was a colleague and greeted her with anticipation. However, she did not respond at all, just muttered something and then silently walked away. I began to feel that something was wrong, but since I had completed the work time, I decided to go straight home. After returning home, doubts still loomed over me, and I tried not to think about that night's experience. After falling asleep that night, everything abnormal descended. I woke up to find myself standing in that park, in the middle of the night, with that woman staring at me from not far away. She was holding something shiny, a kitchen knife. A wave of fear hit me, and the woman suddenly let out a sharp laugh, echoing throughout the entire park. Then she raised the kitchen knife and charged at me. I ran frantically, but the woman was surprisingly fast. Just as the blade was about to touch my back, I woke up. Back to reality, I found myself drenched in sweat. It must have been a dream, but unsettlingly, when I went to the bathroom, there was a new cut on my back in the mirror, as if it had been slashed by a knife. Soon after, I started having the same dream every day, constantly repeating the nightmare of being stabbed. Anxiety and fear took over my life. My frail body and neurotic reactions made me afraid to step outside. Until one day, my mother suddenly called, telling me she had dreamed of me being stabbed in the same scenario. She was worried and wanted me to come home. My mother's home is next to a church. There, my uncle, now an exorcist, looked at me with concern and said I was carrying something malevolent. After some blessings and prayers, my uncle gave me a talisman, saying it could reflect the curse back to the caster. Since then, my nightmares seem to have truly stopped. This experience taught me that even in modern society, the existence of mystical forces should not be overlooked. Curses are not mere fiction from ancient stories, but a reality hidden in everyday life. I am now more cautious and no longer accept any job lightly, especially those that seem to offer easy money. After all, sometimes the cost might be something you cannot foresee or bear.